Accepting change is the hardest ask of all, and understanding why it is necessary is hard, especially if you are the one who needs to change the way you do your job. Change in a large organization is usually a smoother process than driving change in a mid to small business. Change management is far more complex than internal communication alone, and the emotional component of the change process needs to be far more prominent in smaller organizations than in larger ones. Any change, regardless of the sector or size of business, has three main components: people, processes, and environment. What internal communicators should excel at is understanding the informal complaints of the staff, knowing what would take to make the business processes smoother, and forecasting how the status quo may negatively impact the financial performance or reputation of the business. The expert communicator is like a radar. We scan for information, we sift through it, we discern what is important and what is not, we make an informed decision on whether we need to make a recommendation to the leadership, and then we follow it through. Sitting inside an office and monitoring the intranet conversations or the Twitter interactions of the staff is much less important than talking, face-to-face, to the people in your organization, from the CEO to the cleaner. It may sound very strange to you, but very often throughout my career, I have found that the conversations with the cleaners or canteen staff are priceless in gaining a snapshot of the business reality. You should explore this insufficiently untapped stakeholder group as much as you can. If the change is a positive one for the business but detrimental to some of the staff and leading to layoffs, having processes in place to offer alternative placements or training opportunities, including redundancy packages, is a must. You need to help your organization consider all the possible scenarios of staff discontent, and you also need to make sure that the language and information style used are appropriate, proportionate, and formal, allowing for plenty of one-to-one informal and formal interaction. If the change immediately impacts a small group of individuals, for instance, the appointment of a new executive director or chairman, CEO, keep your distance unless you are a board member. Your duty, first and foremost, would be to present the new appointee with a synopsis of the entire communication processes and its style used until then, making sure you emphasize the risks and opportunities presented by the style, tone, and content of these activities undertaken so far. Check what the newcomer's priorities are, and provide the much-needed expert advice on how these should be presented internally and externally. If the change relates to business expansion, especially in the case of mergers, acquisitions, overseas markets expansion, etc., be very well prepared. You need to provide the current staff with 1. The assurance, where applicable, that their jobs are secure. 2. A clear picture of what the change means for various business units and their long-term plans. 3. The rationale for upscaling or downscaling various departments, and, most of all, 4. An outline of how the newly expanded business culture will be like. For the external stakeholder groups, your arguments for expansion need to be grounded in reality, and make sure you have plenty of statistics to offer. Nothing more screams, "There's something wrong happening," than having a poorly prepared business argument for this type of organizational change. When you want to drive change in your organization or be the implementer of the change effort, you need to do a lot of research and groundwork first. Don't assume that just because your workforce is IT savvy and your organization, let's say, specializes in computer games or microprocessors, an email will do. We know that before we launch any campaign, we need to pilot or beta test the concept and the outputs of that campaign to ensure that we are on the right track, and that the end product will ensure our reaching the objectives of the campaign. The same principles apply in change management. If you're called in by the CEO or one of the executive directors and are told that you need to start announcing your colleagues that XYZ will take place, do not run before you walk. If they ask you to make a catchy video or shiny leaflets, don't say yes before you do your research properly. The research is not just about the channels, in other words, about which tools are best suited to communicate the XYZ. There's a step before that called audience insights. Just as we do this for external campaigns and product or service launches, we must use the same approach for change management, too. Keep in mind that corporate affairs or communications, or public relations, in an organization is not a delivery function. It is, and should be, a strategic function. It is up to you to prove that you can both strategize plus deliver. Therefore, before you get excited about intranet, video, Facebook Live, Yammer, WhatsApp, TikTok and other tools and platforms, ask your CEO or executive director the most fundamental question of all. why are we making this change? Or, why is this change necessary? Don't be afraid to do it. You need to understand the rationale behind the change process, not just because you'll have to explain it or sell it to others, but also because it is your role to challenge that executive request if you feel your organization and its internal and external stakeholders are not ready for it or are unlikely to accept it. That's where your strategic and advisory value comes in. You should know the internal power plays and politics. You should know what makes your colleagues tick and what sets them off. If you consider that what you're being asked to promote is detrimental to the business mid to long term, be ready to offer alternatives to those proposed. Saying that there is a problem with this course of action, and failing to identify alternative solutions or failing to itemize, based on evidence, what the problem or problems may be, will significantly negatively impact your credibility. Remember, you do not hold all the answers nor all the solutions to all the problems. No one does. The first, and the best, thing you can do during that discussion is ask for time to reflect on the best way to approach the change proposed and ask for a second meeting. Go to it fully prepared with pros and cons, including alternative solutions or carrot and stick scenarios that may be a better alternative to the approach proposed by your CEO or executive director. Don't be afraid to ask for help, including external support if you do not have the budget to bring in external consultants. There is an entire network of PR, communications practitioners you can always tap into and ask for their advice. You do not always have to pay for external support, but, regardless, you will need to have a non-disclosure, confidentiality agreement in place before you even utter a single syllable regarding your change strategy. An outsider's perspective may provide you with significant insights, with scenarios you never thought possible or options you haven't identified as being readily available. If you're new in your role or you don't think you have sufficient credibility with your CEO or executive director or board due to your age, lack of business skills or lack of sufficient knowledge of the business and or its industry or sector, and your confidence in holding your ground before the leadership is not quite strong as it should be, remember you can say external support just for that particular discussion. You wouldn't be the first, nor the last, in-house communicator to defer to outside expertise. Unfortunately, and this may help you or it may not, organizations tend to trust external consultants' advice much more than they trust their own staff's. It's a matter of human psychology because the higher the daily rate or consultancy fee are, the better the consultant or expert is considered to be. The other advantage they may have over you going at it alone is that inferred approach where your CEO or board might argue that, of course, an external advisor expert has nothing to gain by telling us differently, so, therefore, this is how things must stand. Heeding third-party advice can serve as a validation of your proposal or suggestion. However, there's a caveat here. There may be another time when you challenge the leadership's proposal or provide alternative options. Then, you may be asked, what does the external advisor, consultant you brought last time think about this? Use external support if you don't have the necessary or specialized in-house resources. If you get them to do your job regularly, because you have the budget for it and can get off with it, and your credibility, value to the business and input will rapidly vanish. Thank you for being here today. Power and influence is a journey, and I would love to have you with me on it. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe to this channel. Also, please do leave your thoughts, views and comments below. I would love to read them.